Dr. Helen Gemara, I believe we are at the top because the last thing we were discussing was Hotchu Me'elehen, if that's going to be an Irni Dachas. The Gemara ended up remaining with a suffix. The Gemara tried to bring a raya, and that the Mishnah says that if the Noshim are the Madichin or Katalim are Madichin, it wouldn't be an Irni Dachas. So the Gemara thought that's no different than Hotchu Me'elehen. So the Gemara says, no, there's a very big difference. As Mati explained yesterday, that Hutch Meilen is worse because they came to this on their own. It wasn't because someone influenced them. Zog to Gemara weiter. Ad sheyuda chuba. Until Roiva the city has been Ovid of a Zarah, has been impacted, it doesn't become an Nidachas. Rather, each one is a Yochid that would get skill. Heichi Abdin. So exactly how do you do this? Amr of Yehuda, it's very simple. Donin. Someone does Avodah Zarah. You paskin on him, but you can't kill him because if he's only a Yochid, they don't get skila. But if he's a Rabbin, he gets Cheref. So what do you do with him? You lock him up until you see the total amount of people that end up getting convicted. Done in the Chayvshin. But if you do that, Nimsa Ata Ma'ana as Dinan Shaleilu. These people might have to wait even a couple of weeks after they were condemned to get their Chiv Misa because it could take a couple of weeks till they process all the different accused of Avodah Zarah if they actually did it or not. So that wouldn't be right. Ela Omer Ula done in recycling. They continue to paskin on each person, and each person that they convict, they give skila for, and they treat him like a yochid. But once they get up to Roiv, from here on in, they treat it like a nir hidachas. So Eina Chanami, up until Roiv the city. So Kum D'Chosh, it's technically possible if half of the city plus one did Avodah Zarah, that would technically be a nir hidachas. Half of the city would be killed with skila, and the last guy, only one guy, would be killed with hereg al tirani, because only once you reach the point of Roiv do you say that they're treated like a nir nidakas. But up until that point, everybody convicted would get skila. Itmar is Dr. Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan Amar donin v'cyclin. Rabbi Yochanan holds they give everybody skila. Rish Lakish Amar, so which is what we're saying. You give each one skila until you hit the Roiv, and then once you realize that it's Roiv, moving forward, they get hereg. Rish Lakish Amar. What you do is you set up many batei dinim so that you can process them all in one day. As Rashi says, Zok Rashi, Lav Mishum the Ein Donin Beis B'Yom Echad. This is not because we learned that a bezdin cannot paskin on two different cases of dinei nefashos in one day. That's not the reason. The Amrit Peperek Nigmardin, we learned earlier in the Masechta, the B'misach has done it. If they're paskening on the same Aveira, so it's the same subject matter, they could pasken many people. So that's not why they needed multiple Batadinim. Why did they need multiple Batadinim? Elamishum the Nefishi Edim L'chol Echad Ve'echad. There's so many Edim, there's so many testimonies they have to listen to, there's so much deliberation that they have to do, it's just physically impossible for one Bezdin to do that all. So what do you do? You set up many batei dinim. They actually set up thousands of batei dinim if necessary to be able to paskin on the entire city in one day. Okay, which means, in my cynical mind, that there must have been many people that qualified to be on the Bezdin that weren't on the Bezdin, thinking, why is he on the Bezdin? I should be on the Bezdin. Because when in the time of need, they actually pull these people. They pull all these people out. If you remember at the beginning of the Masechta, remember the Gemara said how many people have to be able to be in the city to be able to have a Bezdin. You needed to have a more than what would be required for a Bezdin. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to pull from a pool. But whatever the case is, here you see they must have had a pretty big pool if they were able to do this. Although the thing Dovi asked, did it ever happen that there wasn't Ir Nidachas? Because it's pretty complicated to make that happen. That each person that should be Eidim and Asran. Okay, so more about it. Any is that so that the local Besdin of 23 was going to be paskening on this case of Ir Nidachas. The Amr Rab Chamer Bar Yosy, Amr Rab Oishia, it says, V'itzeisa is a isha hu, or is a isha he. If there's a yachid that's chayiv misa, that chayiv misa can be adjudicated by a local best. Ish v'isha, if there are yachidim that are being convicted of a chayiv misa, then atamochi l'sharecha, then you could kill that person based on the local regional bezdin of 23. But v'i atamochi kol ha'ir kula l'sharecha. But if we're talking about condemning an entire city, there you can't do that at your local bezdin, and you'd have to do that at the Bezdin Gadol. So the question over here is, you could set up 1 million regional Batei Dinim. How would that work over here? When it comes to the Ir Nidachas, it has to be all paskened by the Sanhedrin Gadol. Elo, this is what you do. Marbin lahen Batei Dinim, uma'ainin b'dineim. So you have multiple Batei Dinim to analyze what happened and to condemn them to skila as a yochid if they were in fact convicted of doing avodah zarah, and then at the end of the day, they have all these niskolim that they now have to bring up to the Bezdin Hagadol. The garmi lehu l'dinayu v'katlahu. Then they're all brought up to the Bezdin Hagadol, who then has to paskin on them in order so that they should be able to be killed. Al Ir Hanidachas. Let's see if Rashi says anything. Right. Ela marbin lahem v'tedinim u'ma'ani b'dineim. To see if there's a rive or not. Hutchu ruba, and if in fact rubam were hutcha, then ma'ilum es kulon bezdin hagadol. So I'm not sure how it works. So how does bezdin hagadol pass on all of them? Because they now have to go through the accused again and pass on them. How would they do all that in one day? I'm not sure. Unless they can do it more quickly because they could rely on the first bezdin. I'm not sure. Does he say anything? Okay, Zok to more weiter. Right, so they have to paskin again. How could the big bezdin paskin on so many people in one day? Wouldn't they have the same problem? I'm not sure. Hakasaka is yoshvei. So the pasuk tells us that the yoshvei nidachas all get killed. Tanu rabbanan. Hachamaris v'gamelos. The traveling trucker, that normally travel from place to place, if they spent the night in the Ir Nidachas, and they also became avodah zarah, if they spent 30 days in this city, then we consider them yoshvei Ir Nidachas, and therefore hein b'sayif, they get hereg u'mamoinon ovad, and all their money gets destroyed in the town square. But pachas meken, if they spent less than 30 days in the city, then hein b'skila, they're treated like an individual who did avodah zarah. They get skila u'mamoinon palait, and his money will be saved from the destruction, and it will go to his yorshim. We have a problem because it sounds from this brayso that we just quoted that in order to become an inhabitant of a city, you have to have been there for 30 days. But we see elsewhere that it takes longer. You have to be there for 12 months. Now there was talking about Lagabe paying taxes, Lagabe contributing to the needs of the city. Once you're in a city for 12 months, you have to contribute to the needs of the city. So you see, it's 12 months to make somebody into a citizen, so to speak. It's not fair. In order to be mechayiv somebody in taxes, he has to be a citizen of that city. But in order to be sucked into the net of Ir Nidachas, the pasuk uses a loshon of yoshvei ir hasois. Doesn't necessarily mean somebody who's a citizen. It means anybody who's there now to even be a permanent resident. let's have a look at the actual pasuk of here. Hakesak es yoshvei ha'ir, right? It's yoshvei ha'ir ahi. That is, it doesn't mean that he is a member of the city. It just means he's a yoshev. To be a yoshev, you only have to be there for 30 days. Zok to Gemara, Meisvei. I'm sorry. From the Yosy. And this has been Nichusa. This is not a kasha. This is going to prove our point. What if someone says, I'm not allowed to have a no from anybody in this city? So now we need to decide who is from this city who may not have a no from. So if the person is there for 12 months, then you cannot have an no from him. But why? Because he's not a b'neir. But what if someone said, I'm not going to have a no from Yoshvei? So then there, if he's even in the city for 30 days, you may not have enough of him. But less than that, so you clearly see the distinction in this brisa between what you need to be called, what you need to do to qualify to be a Yoshvei, which is only 30 days, versus a ben-ir, which is 12 months. Destroy whatever is in the city. If there are tzaddikim that happen to have assets that are not within the city limits, that even though the tzaddik might get killed because he's part of an ir nidachas, nevertheless his assets will be salvaged. But any assets that the tzaddik has inside the ir nidachas will be destroyed. Shlala, the shalal of the city, v'lo shlal shlomayim, but not shalal that doesn't belong to anyone in the city, rather it belongs to the Rebbeinu Shalom, referring to hektish. Ves kol shalala, it says ves kol shalala l'rabbis nichse rishoyim shechutzala. Rishoyim, on the other hand, if they have assets that are not in the city, they will be included. Which now we're going to need to explain what's the difference between Rishoyim and Tzaddikim. We already see a distinction that the Nechasim of the Rishoyim get destroyed even from out of the city, and the Nechasim of Tzaddikim don't. Amar Shimon, Mipnei Amar Torah, Nichse Tzaddikim Shebesoicha Yovedu. The answer is very simple. Mi Garm Lahem Sheyodur Besoicha. What reason are these Tzaddikim living in a city where it's full of Avodah Zarah? What would have brought them to that city? Why would they want to live in that city? There's only one reason why. Mamoina, because they know they have parnasa there, they want to make money there. So if you're only drawn to a city, a bad city, because of money, lefichach mamoinin avei, the money of yours that's in the city will get destroyed. Let me have a quick peek in Rashi. I'm not sure if I'm being a little bit jumpy. This is Rashi gives us the details a little bit later. So let's see that we'll see the details when Rashi wants us to have them. Amar, there's kol shalola tick points. All of the shalol, anything that belongs to anybody in the city, needs to be gathered into the Rechayva ear where it will be destroyed. L'rabis nichse rishoyim shebechutzala. Amar Abchista, this only works uvinik platzim l'sayich. This only works if it's close enough that it can quickly, within the time frame that they're going to destroy the city, if within that time frame it can be gathered into the city, then it will be destroyed. But if it's not, you can't get it to the city, then it will be salvaged. And Rashi is going to tell us another important condition to be considered in the destruction of the city. So let's have a look at Rashi. It's the first skinny line of the second column. The nechasim of Rishoyim that are close to the city, if they could be gathered to the city within the time in that day that they're going to burn it, then hein avudamima. And in avudim, if he has a asset far away that he can't get there on time, then that would not be burnt. V'davka, now this is an important condition. V'davka shekvar hoyu l'soicha ela shemei achshav hoyu mufkadim b'yarachem. Even the nichsei rishoyim that are not in the city, that the Gemara is telling us get destroyed with the assets of the city, that's only if they originated from this city. But if these assets were never ever in this ir nidachas, So how did it become his if he never produced it? Unlike nowadays where you could produce things all over the world, in those days it was assumed how did it become yours because you produced it, you acquired it, and then it must have left. So how would you have an asset that never was in your city? Could go into Naflal and Yerusha. You had an old uncle that left you your Yerusha that was far away. That like Karina Bishlala of it, even if it was in the city. I'm sorry, even if it was close to the city, even if it was close to the city, but it was never in the city, everybody agrees that that wouldn't be included. We're talking about assets that were from the city, that left the city. Those that are close by will be gathered to be destroyed together with the city. Now we don't know at this point if it's pikdonis that are in the Ir Nidachas because the Ir Nidachas people are watching it for others, or if it's vice versa. And the Gemara is going to drill down and explain it eventually. So pikdonis shel anshe Ir Nidachas mutar and their mutar. What exactly is the case? If you're going to tell me that they belong to people from other cities that Punkt have given their items to watch the people in this Ir Nidachas, Shita de Mutarin. Of course they're mutar. The lav shlolahu. That's not called ownership possessions of the condemned. This belongs to a third party. So of course it's not going to get destroyed. We're talking about assets that belong to people in the Ir Nidachas, and they're currently being watched by people that are out of the city. So, Frek the Gemara, if they could be gathered within the city within the time frame, as we just discussed, amay mutar, and why would they be mutar? And if they can't be brought into the city within the time, we already told you that if it's einik button, it's not included. So, what is this case? These pikdonis don't belong to the people of the Ir Nidachas. They belong to people that are not in the Ir Nidachas. And the people in the Ir Nidachas are merely shoymim. So if that's the case, of course it's not shlala. Why in the world do we need a brayso to tell us that they're mutar? And why do we need a chista, to tell us that they're mutar? We're talking about where the shoymim or makabel achrayis. When you're makabel achrayis, now you have a shtickle ownership of it. Because now if something happens to it, you're going to have to pay. It's like yours. Now this is already a shtickle blina strikes again, because they ask on this Gemara from a pekadon that you have a goy that's chametz. Are you allowed to destroy it or not? So there's a distinction made that if you were makabel achrayis on it, it's like it's your mammon, and then you have a chiyuv to destroy that chametz. So when you're makabel achrayis, it's like you have a little bit of an ownership stake in it, and therefore for chametz it would be a problem, but for Ir Nidachas it's not a problem. Amar Chista, behema, chetche shel Ir Nidachas v'chetche shel Ir acheres. There was a behema that was owned b'shutfus, and let's say I plowed one day, and then somebody from the Ir Nidachas plowed a different day. We shared an animal. Asura, that remains asur. Now, it doesn't all have to be destroyed, but it's going to be asur biachila. There's no Rashi specifically on Asura, but it's going to be asur biachila because half of it is an animal that's of an Ir Nidachas. But Isa, if it's a piece of dough that chetze shel Ir Nidachas, the chetze shel Ir acheres, that would be muteres. My timer, behema command like pligadami. A behema, you don't look at it like I own the half that I'm going to eat, the meat that I'm going to eat, and you own the half that you're going to eat. It's one animal, requires one shechita, and we're going to see soon Rashi a more detailed explanation. But Isa command the pligadami. If you and me own 10 pounds of dough b'shutfis, we're going to slice it in half, and you're going to take 5, and I'm going to take 5. So we don't look at it like it's all one unit. Let's have a quick. Let's go a little bit weiter. Let's go just a little bit weiter. Boy Abchista, behemas Ir Hanidachas, a behema of Ir Hanidachas, maud tishani boshchita latar midei. We know for sure this animal has to be destroyed. But the question is, if you shechted it before it was condemned, you'll never be able to eat it. But if you shechted it before, would it at least lose its status of nevela? So now it will not be tamei. Lefi cherev ar barachmanu, the Torah says that everything in the city has to be destroyed. Lefi cherev. Therefore, loishna shachta mishchat, loishna katla miktal. We don't consider it shechted. It's called It's called killed leficharev. So even if you physically shechted it, we don't consider the shchita a shchita, and therefore it will not be matarat in nevela. I don't make even the shachta mahanila shchita, or maybe if you shechted it properly, the shchita does help not to be matir the basar b'achila, but at least that it shouldn't be tamei. My what's the halacha? So Gemara take it. So let's see Rashi's explanation of these two shaylas. Zok to Gemara, a command aloy pliga, an animal is like it wasn't split. Why? The efsher lekazayis basar below shchita. We know that what you need one shchita to eat any part of this animal. Even if you did shecht it, the shchita doesn't do anything to be matter the basar of the ernidachas. The loyla shchita kaiva, this animal is not destined to be shechted. Ela lemisa, it's destined to be destroyed in the ernidachas. Ushchitasa zu he misas abhema. This shchita doesn't count as a shchita. It's like the animal dying. Ve'ein heter afilu hachatzi she'ein shel ernidachas. The shchita will not be matter even the half of the animal that's not from the ernidachas. The chishachat lesimin the ernidachas. If you're only shechting the simin of the ernidachas, ein shoichet elamemish. That's not called shechting the animal because you can't be matter it. It's just killing the animal, and therefore v'lo mahanya b'shchita. So it's a technicality. But half the animal is not necessary, but the shchita which has to work on the whole animal is not going to be a kosher shchita because it can't be a kosher shchita because it's considered a hariga lagabi the chelik of the ernidachas. But is on the other end. Kol emas, the boy palagla, whenever they want to take their portion of the dough, it's considered split. Whatever I got has no shaykhus to the chelik of the ernidachas. So it could be my interest can be totally severed from the interest of the ben ernidachas. Therefore, his side won't impact me. But in the case of an animal being destroyed, and I want to salvage it to be able to eat my half by shechting it, my shechita will not have an impact. And that's why it was a segue into the next shaila. What about a shel ernidachas? Will the shechita at least help? The shechita for sure will not be matter any part of the animal lachila, even the half that would be considered not part of the ernidachas, but will at least have an impact legabe the tumas nevela. As Rashi says, the bein b'shchita bein bariga karina leficharib. It doesn't make a difference how this animal was killed. We consider it murdered based on the fact that it's from an ernidachas. Davilu shachta, we look at it like it's a misa ba'almahi v'loy mahanimidi. It doesn't help at all, and therefore there will be a tumas nevela. Adilma leficharib hainu shaloi kederech shchita. When do we say the chiyuv of an ernidachas is to destroy it not derech shchita? And if it's not derech shchita, yes, it'll be nevela. Aval derech shchita, at least mahanyula l'tahayra midei nevela. Why? Tenhida la'achila itzera. We know for sure it's also b'achila v'saranohu, and this basar is also b'anoh because it's shel ernidachas. Aval tahani l'tahayra midei nevela. But at least the shchita should help to be retired the animal from the nevela. And the Gemara blibes with a take. How about seer noshim tzidkani yismau? What about the hair of noshim tzidkani? The Gemara doesn't even ask a question about women that did avodah zarah. But what if a woman did not do avodah zarah? What is the deal with her hair? Will that be aser b'hana or not? Amar Rava, let's understand what the shayla is. How the rishiyos aser? You're telling me that the hair of the Oivdei Avodah Zarah will for sure be Asr? It can't be. Because the only shalom that has to be destroyed in an Nidachas are those that there's two steps. Take bites, Visarafta. They have to be gathered and then they're burned. Ksiv. The only assets that are considered condemned because of an Nidachas are those that are just about ready to be burnt. All they need to do is be gathered together. Yotzazeh, but hair is different. There's a step added that the Torah doesn't list, which would mean cutting of the hair. So therefore, it must be that the hair of a person would not be destroyed. So basically, they would be destroying all the assets of the person. The person is going to be killed, but if she cuts her hair off, she could sell her hair before she dies. And the value of the hair can be given to her heir. Right? So Zok to Gemara weiter. And I can imagine someone's mother is about to be killed because she was an Oivdei, and all he's worried about is maybe I could sell my mother's hair and get Epis Yerusha, because everything else that she has is being destroyed. Ela Amar Rava, so I'll tell you what our discussion is about. Ela Amar Rava, Bepei Nachris, if your mother has a shaitel, what if this woman had a shaitel? So Freik or Hechadam, Idem Mechuber Begufa. If she's wearing it, Kagufa Dami. We know that the clothes on the people that are getting killed in the Nir Nidachas, their clothing are not destroyed as part of the city. So everyone who's Chas V'Sholom as a parent in the Nir Nidachas, they will at least yashin the children that their parents were. They're at least yashining the clothing that their parents were wearing. That does not get burnt in the fire. We treat that kegufa, and that won't get destroyed in the fire. And of course, nothing happens to those clothing. So those clothing are salvaged. Correct. She wasn't wearing her shaitel. It was on the shaitel head. Sifta is like a head made out of styrofoam with like a long neck. That means a hook, right? It's hanging on the hook, right? So therefore, do you say it's like any other possession that's in the city that we say gets destroyed? Since she wears it all the time, we don't look at it like it's a random asset. Rather, it's kaluvusha dami. It's like her beged, and therefore it will not be destroyed. And on that, the Gemara says, teku. But a Risha, that would not be considered, that would get killed anyway. A Risha, that would get killed anyway. All questions only about tzedkaniyos, if we would say that. Okay, Gavaltik. Zok the Gemara weiter. The best kol shalala tick points al teich rechayv. Tanur Rabbanim. Ein lo rechayv. What if the city doesn't have a big central area, a big plaza? Ein no nasas er nidachas divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel holds this city cannot be near nidachas. But Rabbi Kiva says it's not a problem. Sure, it could become an near nidachas. Rather, ein lo rechayv, oisin lo rechayv. We'll build a rechayv so that this city could be processed like an near nidachas. Rabbi Shmuel holds al teich rechayva means in order for a city to qualify as a near nidachas, it has to have already had a rechayv. Rabbi Kiva says no, it just means in order to burn the city down, you have to do that in the rechayv. So you make a rechayv. Zok tehel gemar vayter. V'hakdeisha shaboy yiftu. The Mishnah tells us that if there are hekdeshes in the city, you don't destroy it, you redeem them, and then I guess you could destroy them. And the money takes on the kedusha. Tanur Rabbanan. Hoyiba kadishim kachim mizbeach. They were karbonis. You had chatos and an oila and a shlomim in the city. Yemusu, they get killed. Kache bedekabayis. What if you had kache bedekabayis? You had anything of value that somebody was makdish. The halacha is yiftu that you'll be paida utrumos. What if there was truma in the city that's being destroyed? You cover, you don't burn it, you let it rot. Umashasheni v'kisvei hakodesh. You bury them. You don't burn them. That's the Tanakama. Reb Shimon Omer behemta. It says you destroy the behemta, the behemoths of the Irnidachas, to exclude v'loy behemoths bechar umaiser. A behemoth bechar and meiser does not get destroyed. Which we're going to have to understand what's the distinction between that and kachim mizbeach, right? Shlala. It says the shlala gets destroyed. Prat lekesef hektish v'kesef meiser. This excludes kesef hektish and kesef meiser. So this brisa needs some explanation. Let's just see Rashi first. Hoyiba kachim mizbeach kagoin oilos v'ashamois shal rishayim b'soicha. Nehida loy karina behu es kol behemta leficharev da loy behemta he. Animals of hektish might not be considered the behemoths of people of the city. It's already a carbon. El behemoth shemayim. Elo miyisusa hu lahakriv karbonis shal rishayim alolu shudchu. But it's mius to be makriv on the mizbech, such a carbon. So even though technically there are regular kosher karbonos and they should be taken to the Beis Hamikdash and they should be processed there, but it's mius to bring a carbon of a Russia who's an Ovid of a Zara. Therefore, Hilchach Yemusu, you let them die. So they don't die because technically they're from near Nidachas, and they don't die because technically they're apostle. They die because it's miyas to be makar of these karbonis. So what do? Kain to nois on the kippah, umachil nois on soirin, asher kreis on nefkas. They feed them soirin, which will cause their stomachs to collapse. The filu demeim also could come on. We couldn't possibly redeem them, let them get a mum and redeem them like you do to other psulei mekdoshim. You don't do that because everything here is miyas, so everything is destroyed. And then we have Reb Shimon, who will need to be explained as it will be now. Amar, hoyba kachim kachim. So therefore, hoyba kachim kama kachim is bech yamusu. Frektim of amayamusu. Why would we kill them? Why not yiru achiyastavu? We can't be marked of them. So let them go to graze until they get a mum. The yimkru will sell them. These animals themselves are going to be salvaged. The yiplu the and the money that has a kedushas carbon will go in the dova. Rabbi Yochanan, you know why? Because zevach rishon te'eva. It's such a teheva to have these animals that are animals of Oivdei Zara that we don't even want to let their money go to the mizbeach. Everything just gets destroyed. For Shlokish Amar, mum and bailam who? It's mum and bailam. And if it's mum and bailam, avada the mums would have to be destroyed. Avada the animals would have to be destroyed. These animals belong to the owner. So therefore, where do we destroy the animals? You know what type of kachim the Bryce is talking about. When it says Yamusu, it's kachim that you're chayiv on their achrais, and therefore it will get destroyed. For Reb Shimoni, the Omar Mammon Bailamu. And it's going according to Reb Shimon, who holds its Mammon Bailam. Zakt Rashi, Reb Shimon the Omar Bazov, kachim shechai b'charisun is Mammon Bailamu. And therefore, did I know on it? It's treated like it belongs to the person. We don't look at it like it's Mammon Hektish. Hilchach, le'inyan ir anidachas nami Mammon Bailamu. It's Mammon Bailam. V'daininu lefi charif. Really, it has to be destroyed, like all the other assets of an ir nidachas that has to be destroyed. Kishar be'emisha b'soicha. V'hilchach asurim demeim bano. Therefore, its money is asur bano. So you can't ask me a kasha. Why not wait till they get a mum and sell them and then use the money l'nedava? The money is also asur bano because this is mum and bailam. So why does it say yamusu? It should say shiachrimu aisayman. If it's a regular mum and bailam and it's treated like the assets of an ir nidachas, why are we dealing with these animals differently than any other animals that belong to the ir nidachas? That's mishum kvoit shemayim. Since the lamaisa they were karbonis, we're not going to destroy them the same way we destroy the rest of the assets of the ir nidachas. We just let them die. So really, they are part of the destruction of the ir nidachas, but we do it in a nicer way. Okay, gewaltig. Zog the Gemara weiter. For the Gemara, you cannot say that the ratio of this brisa is following the sheet of Reb Shimon. For the simple reason is that Reb Shimon didn't come onto the stage until later on. It says Reb Shimon Reb Hemta. So Vais Techais, up until that point, the brisa was not being authored by Reb Shimon. I'm going to say for Reb Shimon, ratio love Reb Shimon. The ratio can't be going according to Reb Shimon. So we once again need an explanation as to why Kachim is Bechimusu, and we can't just wait till they have a mum and we could redeem them. Ela Bekachim Kalim. The ratio is speaking about Kachim is Beach, but not an Osham and an Oila. Rather, it's speaking about a carbon Shlomim and a carbon Toida, which are Kachim Kalim. But leave it Rabbi Yosy Aglili, and they're following the sheet of Rabbi Yosy Aglili, the Omar Kachim Kalim Mum and Bailam. Rabbi Yosy Aglili has a sheet of that all Kachim Kalim is considered Mum and Bailam. And since it's Mum and Bailam, that's why they're included in the shlola of the ir nidachas. And again, but out of respect for kabbanis, we don't just destroy them like everything else. We let them die. Okay, gewaltig. Ava kacha kachim mai. But what if it was kacha kachim? Yiftu, are you taka telling me that we don't consider it mum and bailam, and therefore we can wait till they get a mum, and we could be paid to the money, and the money can go to the dava? If that's the case, adatani seifa kacha bedekabayis yiftu. The Brisa wants to give an example of something that you don't destroy that you would be paid. And what was the example the Brisa found? You didn't need to go so far. And live like Velista B'didah. We could have even given an example of Kachim Mizbeach, that's Yiftu. Where do you say it's destroyed because it's moment bailim? Because the shum kalim. But if it's kachim, which we don't consider moment bailim, you could be paid. So why didn't our brisa say that? Zok the Gemara, because there is a case of kachim that even though it's not moment bailim, even though it's moment hektish, nevertheless you would not be able to be paid. And what would that be? Even the ikachata shemesu ba'ileh. If there's if it was a carbon asham, if it was a carbon oila, agreed, you should be able to be paid. But if we just use the general term of kachim, which we're using, included in that heading is also a chatos. Now the problem here is this chatos, its owner died because its owner is going to be killed because he's a member of the Erni Dachas. So this is a classic case of chatos shemesu ba'ileh. And the loch is a chata shemesu ba'ileh, the lemisa, it goes lemisa, and you're not pointed. Therefore, lo psikalei. So the reason why the mission didn't say b'medev because you could be pointed is because, as a rule, you cannot say that all kachim could be pointed, because if it was a chatos, you won't be able to be pointed. You have to let it die. That's why, in order to find a clean case where you could be pointed, the brisa went to Bedek Habayis. Bishlama. Rabbi Yochanan le'amak Shlokish. I can understand why Rabbi Yochanan didn't want to learn like Shlokish, because he held the chsiv zevach v'sham te'eva. He held that even if you're going to say that it's moment hektish and it shouldn't be included in the shalol of the nidachas, but still it's a te'eva, it's a moment of te'eva. Hashem wants nothing to do with that. That's how he understood it. El Rish Lakish my time alone, Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish also agrees the animal itself he can't be makrib. So why didn't he agree with Rabbi Yochanan? The actual animal, I can agree. The pasuk zevach l'shoyim te'eva tells you can't be makrib because it's a te'eva, even though it's not really part of the shalol of the Hanidachas. Aval hacha, even the ishtani. But if you're being pointed, the actual animal you're not being makrib. You just want to be makrib the money. You want to buy with the money another animal that the zevach l'shoyim te'eva wouldn't carry over to the money. It would only stick on the actual animal that was the carbon of a person from the Hanidachas. Rabbi Shimon Aimer behemtecha v'loy behemes b'chor u'maiser. Rabbi Shimon added on to the brisa that behemtecha excludes a behema of b'chor and maiser. So for exactly what is the situation with this b'chor and this maiser? B'mayaskinim. Ilema v'tamimin. A b'chor tam, it's a regular carbon. Shalal shemayim. So of course it wouldn't be included in the Hanidachas. So I don't need Rabbi Shimon to be medayik from behemtecha to exclude a behema of maiser, because if a behema of maiser surely is not going to be included in the shalom. Ela b'bali mumen. The halacha is if a bechor gets a mum, you don't even have to be paid. It automatically goes to the kohen. It becomes chulin. So it's speaking b'bali mumen. So for the more that shalom, it belongs to the kohen. It's regular chulin, belongs to the kohen. In fact, that should be destroyed. So what type of animal of bechor is Reb Shimon saying that we need a special limo to tell us that it's not destroyed? Speaking about balimun. Yet you still need, even though it's mamish chulin, you still need a pasuk to tell you that it's not included in the shol. We would still say it's not in the shol of the city. Right? A moment ago we said if it's a balmum, it should be shlola, right? It belongs to the person in the city. But no, it would be different. Why? Because umisha nechal b'tarish behemtecha. You know what type of animal is included in the prohibition? Something that's your animal. Yotzu elu she'eina nechal b'tarish behemtecha ela b'tarish b'char u'maiser the shlal shemayim. If you eat a piece of meat, I would say, oh, this is your animal. But if you eat meat that's from a bechor that got a mum, you'll say, oh, that's his bechor. That's that kohen's bechor. So since it's always referred to with a shem lovi, it's his bechor meat. Therefore, we don't consider it shlola, and from behemtecha will be mamayid. So it would be considered shlola because technically it belongs to this kohen who owns this animal. But behemtecha tells you the only type of behemoth that we're including in the destruction of it in dachas, if it's mamish behemtecha, meaning we refer to as your animal. But if we say it's your animal of bechor, that's something that we learn from behemtecha that would not be included in the destruction of the city. Beautiful. Ravina's approach to explaining Reb Shimon would not be consistent with the way Shmuel understood Reb Shimon. Dharma Shmuel, Hakoil karev, you could be makrev everything. Hakoil nifta, and you could be poid everything. Mike Omer, what this is a cryptic message. What does he mean to say? Hachi Omer, kol shekarev kishu tam. If you have a carbon that when it's a tam you're makrev it, v'nifta kishu balmum, and when it's a balmum you still can't use it until you're poid it. There we say mishlala imit. That would be excluded from shlola. It's not your shalom. But the chol shekarev kishu tam, the einay nifta kishu balmum. But a bechor, where if it's a tam, you're makriv it on the mizbeach. If it's a balmum, you don't have to be paid it. To go in bechor meiser, that we will be mamayit from behema. An interesting approach. So let's see what Rashi says. Rashi says over here, "V'chol shekarev kishu tam, ve'enoi nifta kishu balmum." Rather, elanecha lebailim, the bailim eat it, even without a mum. To go in bechor meiser. So ahu lav shalal shemayim mikru. We don't call that shalal shemayim. Va'afilu b'tamusim. So this is a very big chiddush. What we're saying is that if something is you're makrit when it's a tam, but if it becomes a balmum, you don't have to be poided. We actually don't call that shalal shemayim. We call that shlola. Why? Because it's a litmus test. Yes, when it's a tam, it's a regular carbon. But since when it's a balmum, it does not require pidyon. We call that shlola. We consider that it belongs to the person, even when it's a tam, which is a little bit of a chiddush. So therefore, if it wasn't for behemtecha, we would include it in shlola. We need behemtecha to tell you that it's not included. So this is not a machloikis in halacha between Ravina and Shmuel. It's just a different approach to understanding why you might think it would be included. But you cannot ask me a question. While it's a tam, it is shalal shemayim. Why? Because the fact that if it has a mum you can eat it tells you that it's shalala. Because if it had a mum, you wouldn't need any pidyon. Therefore, since you would have considered it shalala ir, because it doesn't need any pidyon in the event that it becomes a balmum, therefore you need behemta to be ma'it a bechor and a ma'aser as a tam. If it's a balmum, it's shlola, we said, and in fact it would get destroyed. But behemta will tell you that if it's a tam, we don't consider it shlal shemayim because of the litmus test. Because if it had a mum, it wouldn't need pidyon. Therefore, we might destroy. You might think you would destroy a bechor and a ma'aser that's a tam. Kamash malon behemta you don't destroy it. The mishlala leklemutinu. The hainu pliga. And this is the nakuda in which Ravina argues with Shmuel. The iu mukila afilu b'tamimim. He says even by tamimim, the pasuk is referring to tell me that you don't destroy it. The kasav b'chor ma'aser balmumin behemta krina. It would be considered behemta ubesayif, and it would get killed. Okay, so that would be the nafkamina. So there would actually yes be a nafkamina. Because according to Shmuel, it's the Bechor Tam that we say is not included, but a Bechor Balmum might be considered Shalom. Okay, so to Gemara weiter. To please the Shmuel. Okay, here it is. Truma shirkabu. If you have truma, you let it rot. That's only if the Yisrael has it, and he doesn't really own it because he has to give it away, and he might give it to a kohen who's not in the city. So if he gives it to a kohen who's not in the city, it wouldn't have to be destroyed. So therefore, you can't burn it, but Lamaisa he has it, so therefore you let it rot. About truma biyad kohen, but what if there's a kohen in Russia in the city and he received this truma already, so it's 100% his? Even the mamayna who tisarf, of course it has to get burned. Masav Rabbi Yosef, Ma'aser Sheni, the Kisvei HaKodesh, Yigonzu, you have to bury them. Freit Gemara, but Ma'aser Sheni biyad Yisrael, Kitruma biyad kohen dami. Ma'aser Sheni biyad Yisrael is like truma biyad kohen; it's 100% his. Vikatani, what does the Bryce say you do with it? Yigonzu, you bury it. The question is, why don't you destroy it as regular shalal of an nidachas? Eliyat marhacha itmar. It's getting late, and tomorrow we only have the Amud Aleph to do, and not Amud Beis. I will stop here because I don't want to come like that. Okay, shkoyach. So we will stop here. We'll come tomorrow.